After Cluj, I questioned how effectively Mouz was going to keep up their form, and I'm not 100% convinced this is a forever form that Mouz are in, because, it takes an average of 2 to 3 months before a new IGL change actually fully takes effect. Either they kind of have a downturn or they have an uptick in form. However, Brawlin's been doing a really good job. Even if they have a downturn, I think it's fair to say that he's done a relatively solid job, at worst, a relatively solid job for Mouz so far. The questions I had initially were, I really feel like Mouz has the best game planning of any team in Tier 1, and they have for at least the year I've really been paying attention to this. And because of that, they enter a lot of games with an initial advantage, with rounds like this one, where they knew that Mezzi had an MP9 in the previous round. Mezzi, when he has an MP9, typically sticks with it and plays towards B apps, but even when he doesn't have an MP9, I'm not 100% sure they knew, I think they knew, he generally is left alone B on the bonus round where he doesn't have the greatest weaponry. If he doesn't have an MP9, it's probably going to be a FAMAS. They go for the play towards B, they catch him off guard, take him down, and win the round, right? And that's the type of game plan I'm talking about. Mouz are just really effective at these sorts of things. However, early on, especially at Cluj, we saw several games where the game plan didn't necessarily begin correctly. They started out at a bit of a disadvantage, and there was just no ability for Brawlin seemingly to adjust the game plan, to slow things down, to try alternative looks, to try and change things up, at least bring them back into the game. I think there's several games now where he's done exactly that. The fragging from Spinks is a huge upgrade. I mean, you have to think of it kind of like they traded Shuhi for Brawlin and Brawlin for Spinks. And replacing Brawlin's lurking with Spinks as a lurker has been a massive upgrade. Spinks is just an incredible player. Not that Brawlin did a bad job or anything, but it's just a very obvious upgrade. Spinks creates openings in the mid-round so often to get Mouz into these rounds where they sometimes have problems. And of course, I think they are on a bit of a honeymoon at the moment, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to maintain a very high level. I don't know what that level will actually even out at, but I mean, even if it goes down a little bit, with their old roster, they still had the ability to beat Spirit pretty effectively, because I think Spirit is really easy for Mouz to game plan against. They make lots of kind of very consistent plays where they make the same play quite often. Mouz are very good against that. So Vitality is the main team you'd see as a problem. But actually looking at the game itself, that's some great entry fragging from Spinks and Brawlin. They both pick up a kill, and essentially Vitality aren't completely locked out of this round. They still have a chance, especially if Apex is just going to double dink Torji immediately. By the way, Torji, his uptick in performance is kind of incredible. And that's one where I start to question, is it possible that Shuhi was like, oh my God, Robs. Is it possible Shuhi was not optimally utilizing Torji? I feel like that's not the case. I haven't done like a deep dive on this, but I feel like that's generally not the case. When I think about Torji in the previous year, he was kind of just missing shots sometimes. It felt like he just wasn't quite himself in a lot of big moments. However, currently, I guess he's the best opper outside of the big three, Zau, Monasi, and Shiro. Maybe I'm forgetting someone. I do think Woxic is highly underrated. I think Woxic is actually an incredible opper. Is he better than Torji? I think probably not. One of the problems with Woxic is that he's just not that great of a rifler. I think Torji, think of Wonderful specifically. Wonderful, I was asked on the Blast desk about this, do you think Wonderful or Woxic are a better opper? And my answer was, I think Woxic's a better opper than Wonderful, but that Wonderful has got the rifling, so he might arguably be a more complete player. I think from the Torji perspective, I think Torji is probably... he's probably better in both regards, but I would really have to look at it because they're both actually... Torji's getting rated at least reasonably now, but Woxic is still highly underrated. I actually think Woxic does a lot of things... I'll make a video on this specifically. I think he does a lot of things for his team that don't necessarily show up on the scoreboard or the stats sheet, but that make his job very hard, but yet he does them really well. But anyways, this is the best of 5 final. Mouz, they got 13 out on map 1. I expected them to kind of mental boom after that and really struggle to come back into this. And they actually did a really good job coming back into it. They bring it to 5 maps. They make every opportunity for a round win or for a series win to happen. But at the end of the day, Vitality, it kind of feels like it's in their hands how they lose or whether they lose games. Because, Zaiwu had one bad map. You have Rops that I think Flamesy had a couple bad maps. And when they're on, it just feels borderline unbeatable. But Torji holds the angle, picks up a nice shot. Spinks swings through a smoke and aim duels ZywOo, which is just not generally supposed to happen. I think this might be the map where ZywOo actually has just kind of an objectively bad map, but that's one where Spinks is in a reasonable position there. He's trying to catch ZywOo off guard, especially he's trying to catch someone that's like looking towards the ramp play or potentially throwing utility. Is not an uncommon play to have that player swing out of Palace off of contact like that recently. It's actually very popular. But generally, if you run into ZywOo and ZywOo's kind of like completely ready for you, he's getting that kill the majority of the time. In this case, Spinks grabs the kill, 4-2. Spinks has a 9-3 right now. He's 9-3. But when I say Mouz come into games with a very good game plan, I mean, this is a pretty obvious example of that. They went in, they had the initial play on that bonus round, they get the round win. Then they've got this idea that they want to go for this double Palace play. They went for it actually a few rounds back, and they actually canceled because of something going on the map. But they're going to go for that smoke Molly combo. Flamesy's just going to absolutely destroy. I mean, if he misses that kill on Jimmy, and Jimmy, I mean, it's not the easiest kill. Jimmy's kind of well past him before he actually turns into it. He misses that kill, that round becomes very complicated. But so this is probably a bad example of their game planning. But I think the example is that it's 5-2. They've had some very clear, good ideas, including Torji posted on that stairs peak. Flamesy loves going for that stairs play. In fact, it was even in one of the ESL roundtables at some point that Flamesy knew that he had this tendency where he would nade ramp from jungle and then swing stairs every time. And someone mentioned it from another team, like that he had this tendency, he had this thing that they counter strat it, and he's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's just kind of funny. But 5-3 at this point, after losing 13-0, you're expecting at some point in this game Vitality's just gonna turn it on again and just absolutely destroy them, like regardless of the current score. But what we have here, Rops throws the initial, or has the initial flash from Flamesy. Spinks is there. Spinks shooting while blind kind of tells you, I think, that there's a second player ramp, but there's no guarantee. I mean, the idea just being that if Spinks was alone there, the odds are he would probably just try and get away, or he just wouldn't be in that position to begin with. Rops doesn't overcommit. He just gets that kill, backs up, and then he has a chance to get the second kill. But the key here is that Xerxin and a couple of other players are actually making their way up connector at the same time. And Xerxin is about a quarter of a second from getting that kill on the player balcony. Brawlin somehow gets away with, I mean, he should have gotten that kill on Apex initially. He somehow manages to get past Flamesy. I think Flamesy is worried about, because Flamesy's on 30 health, he's worried about Brawlin just turning and killing him, so he probably played that a little bit safe, and that meant Brawlin could actually get that kill on Apex and get away. And then you know that ZywOo is towards the B side based on the way this round is played out, which means you're kind of just looking at where is that rotate going to come from. Brawlin, really nice shot on Flamesy, and that's the troubling part in some of these rounds where, you know, if you watch this and Flamesy doesn't peek and then Brawlin walks into jungle, it's easy to say when you're like watching this from a spectator POV, like, oh, you know, Flamesy should have like peeked and stopped that market play. But the problem is the moment that Flamesy died there, it immediately prompted that rotate back to A, right? It was obvious that the last player was B. And so even though, you know, sometimes you're going to see plays like that where it feels like that player should make more contact, it's always a catch-22 where you can go for that contact, but if it goes wrong for you, you just lose the round immediately, even though, you know, sometimes you have to do it, sometimes you don't. It's just, I'm just highlighting the idea that it's not always as easy to, you know, to play out these situations as it might appear with X-Ray on. 4v4 off the bat. Huge benefit to the Ts, as always. It just opens up the map pretty significantly. It does also force the CTs, especially on this map, usually to go aggressive into Palace or into ramp. Now, if you're playing as a T and you don't have a player in Palace, it becomes a bit awkward. That's why you're going to see most teams have a player in Palace the majority of the time. It's a little bit easier to pivot back ramp than it is to pivot back Palace because it's such a long pathway. In Apex, it's actually going to make the choice to walk all the way through. Does he not see? I think Xerxin is just kind of in place, but actually Xerxin, okay, Xerxin does hear that, finds the kill. Oh, don't pull your knife out. ZywOo misses, back to default. He's in a good spot, but I mean, he has to peek there. He's really got no other option but to peek out to try and make something happen after he misses that shot. It's crazy. That round could have gone completely differently. If ZywOo just hits that shot initially and he takes out Xerxin, Then he goes into ramp, ducks into ramp, they play retake, they're 3v3. This is an extremely winnable round. But as soon as he misses that shot, he kind of has to back up. Did he have time? Maybe he could have gone back. Maybe he could have repeaked, because if he knows there's only one player ramp, so maybe he could have repeaked, but he's worried about getting shot in the back from stairs as well. And maybe he won't be able to get the kill and get away into ramp to actually set himself up reasonably afterwards. So I don't think anything crazy really happened there. But it's just that round probably, I mean, I don't know, probably would have been Vitality's round, but it would have been a very complicated round to actually close out for Mouz if ZywOo would just hit that shot. But, I mean, he's 4-6 right now. Sometimes ZywOo's going to have an op game, even if that's rare. I was looking at a graph the other day. Average kills per round of the top 3 players, so m0NESY, ZywOo, and Donk. Average kills per round. And m0NESY and ZywOo, or m0NESY and Donk both have a bit, they're very consistent, like surprisingly consistent, but they have some, it's not like a perfect curve as what you want. What is it, Gaussian distribution or whatever? Is that what that is? Whatever. It's not the perfect curve, but then you look at ZywOo and it is literally just like the average of all players, as in like perfectly consistent, just shifted a bit to the right. So he does exactly the same as the average of all players, except he does it like 0.3 kills per round better. It's actually unbelievable how consistent ZywOo is, but he's still going to have a bad game once in a while. And obviously, one or two of them happen in this series. And I think Mouz is also a team. It's interesting because I feel like when you watch Vitality versus Donk, this is just to bring up Spirit, like just the style of these teams. When you watch Vitality play against Spirit, it feels like they are willing to brawl against Donk, and it's like, look, we're going to trade frag, we're going to try and take you down, and we're going to kind of lock the rest of your team out of it. Whereas I feel like when Mouz play against Donk, I mean, they've said in interviews once or twice before that they're like, yeah, we don't really like necessarily, like we don't have this huge plan against them, you just have to, I think they kind of do. It feels like when you see Mouz against Spirit, it's more like they're trying to neutralize Donk rather than just frag out and like frag better or like trade better on him. And for obvious reasons. I mean, it's obviously going to be easier for Vitality to do that against Donk than it is for Mouz. Oh my God, Spinks. Like, this is one of the things, like, Spinks, if you look at Spinks last year, he was like a really great player, but I feel like this is common in lurkers, especially, is that when they have faith in their team, when they trust their team, they make these crazy plays and they can be incredibly impactful. But when I'm thinking of it kind of like blame F a little bit, but I'm thinking of it kind of like Rob's towards the end of his tenure on Mouz and towards the end of his tenure on FaZe. In both cases, I feel like Rob's got a little bit baity. And I think the idea is that he just didn't really trust his team that well. So he was playing to prioritize his life so he could be in clutches and win rounds that way when he didn't feel maybe like his team was going to close out rounds if he took a risk and, he went 1-for-1 or something like that. And I feel like the same may have been true with Spinks, where, on Vitality, felt like he was a little bit more passive towards the end of Vitality. He wasn't really making these sorts of crazy plays, but maybe he was just kind of having an individual dip in form. Maybe he wasn't like getting along with some players on the team, or maybe there was some reason that he just wasn't performing up to his standard. And, it's like, I'm kind of overanalyzing, very possible, but that's just kind of what it felt like. Still, 9-3 half for Mouz. Then the pistol goes the way of Vitality. I mean, that's no real surprise, although to be fair, I mean, that's both pistols go the way of Vitality, which is kind of crazy for a game that's 9-4 for both pistols to have gone one way. You have the Force for Mouz coming out. They've got a really good setup on A, where you've got the scout towards Ticket, you've got a player under balcony, and what you really would like is for a flash to come through from someone. It's one of those ones where, nobody really wants to take the sacrifice to buy a flash, but at the same time, what you really need if you're Xerxin, you get the first kill, and if you could have a flash, like if Brawlin had a flash, for example, and just tossed it for Xerxin to peek, Xerxin gets 2 there, and that really changes the outlook of the round entirely. Instead, with no utility to support, I mean, it's still great. Obviously, Brawlin gets 1. He's still in a position where he could get a second, but that type of, like, go for the first kill and then assume you're going to get it and then try and delay for a flash to actually get you the second kill is kind of like the standard. Unfortunately, they don't have one. They relied a little more on the scouts, and I don't think Torji, I think he only tagged like one player in the previous round, and then he got pushed off really effectively. So it's just not the perfect situation to be in. And then it's just going to be an eco where they don't have much money to work with. They didn't really save very many guns either. They have the scout from Spinks towards Ticket, obviously best place to have it. Gets a couple tags, but a couple tags isn't really round winning scenarios, and Vitality are more than aware of how to deal with that type of player, or that type of situation. Into the first buy, and you do already have an op on Torji. Gonna hold it towards A. It's actually interesting to see him bring it towards A immediately in this type of situation, because you can see like Palace pops come out of these types of rounds. You can see some rounds that are quite tough for an opper, a solo opper to hold. But at the same time, one of the most common plays that I see recently is actually on these sorts of rounds to kind of lurk out a ramp. Not lurk out a ramp, but like contact out a ramp, sometimes with 2-3 players, or Palace, either one. And just try and trade on that player on the site, because one of the most common things for a long time has always been to establish dominance in middle by playing sometimes even 5 men middle on the first gun round. But you try and establish dominance in middle. That's kind of like the most common thing to do on the first gun round. And in that type of situation, you can kind of play out of that by contacting heavy on one of the extremities. Obviously, Mouz did it as well, but that was on, a Vitality bonus round. This time around, I actually thought this round was like pretty clearly going to go the way of Vitality, so I wasn't even like concerned about it too much. But this is actually Jimmy, who's been struggling quite a bit this year, I feel like. And not only that, but in this game up until this point, gets 2, strafes across to go for another one. I think the idea is that he knows he could get flanked here, because he could just back up. But the problem is, if he backs up, he actually runs into another problem that's not really any better, is that if he gets those 2 kills, here and he backs up, he can't actually cross over. Someone could just be posted on him, and he's actually vulnerable to someone bench, so we would have to kind of stay like here. Then he can get peeked out from bench. It's like not perfect in any scenario. So he tries to go for the play, because I think it was Zywoo. Was it Zywoo with an op that like had taken a shot, so he thought he could cross over? Either way, he gets 2. Brawlin rotates in. They have a fast rotate to get 3 players there. Brawlin gets 2. They pick up 10 rounds. And this is where you're kind of thinking like, okay, Mouz are going to look to close this out if they can win this round. This is kind of the pivotal round where if Mouz win this, it should be almost impossible for Vitality to make their way back into it. One of the things that I think Torji has done incredibly effectively, and I saw this against G2, which is, a series I'll put a video on as well. I saw this against G2 where he's just so effective at being hard to read with the op. He's constantly catching players that are either expecting a rifler there based on tendencies, maybe on the way they throw their utility or something. I see more players walk into Torji thinking that he's not going to be in a certain position than almost anyone else at the moment. And it's interesting. I kind of want to take a deep dive into exactly how that happens. Maybe it's just kind of like it's just kind of chance that he's done it that way. Of course, positions, like you play certain positions that are easy for people to walk into, but obviously at the same time, teams are still trying to make sure like they're jiggling, they're trading, they're making it hard for oppers. And Torji just gets those free kills where it's like free shot, no trade, get the kill, back up with 100 health. He does that so consistently recently, but he gets the kill. Xertion finds 1. Now Zywoo is basically alone, and he hits that ridiculous shot to actually turn it into a 3v3. That is unbelievable. And then you have this situation where sometimes you notice this, where this player in Palace, he wants to make contact. The problem is that, like, if you wait long enough from... Oh my god, they don't have time to get the bomb. They actually don't have time to get the bomb. That's crazy. What happened to the bomb? Oh, Zywoo just didn't pick it up. The bomb died behind Zywoo when he just ran past it, maybe thinking that Rops was going to come up behind him and grab it afterwards, and then they just completely forget about it. Wow, that's crazy. What I was going to say is, like, a lot of the time, this player in Palace, it's kind of awkward because once the T's clear out the entire bomb site, it's very obvious you can only be in one spot. Because if T's are hitting A, they're going to have a player or multiple players either coming through ramp or through Palace. It's extraordinarily rare for an A hit to happen through connector with nobody coming from the A side. But sometimes, right, you only have one player and not two players going through the A side, or you only go through one side. But the idea being that sometimes it's very awkward to be in Palace, and people kind of underestimate what it actually is like, because if they clear out the site, a good team is just going to know what's going on. Anyways, nice play from ZywOo. It's just so common to instantly, like, you see that smoke, you take a shot, you immediately try and molly out. I mean, I wouldn't even say that's a play from ZywOo because that's obviously a coordinated play from Vitality, but it's a nice play from ZywOo, so I guess I will say it. But he takes that shot. He wants to immediately pivot into mollying behind the boxes. That buys a little bit of time for him to pivot around towards connector, and then you know, it delays the mid control, because if you can't go out to here, this is kind of like your safe spot. This whole area, like all of these areas, are kind of like danger zones, because if you get flashed, if someone was to flash over and nade out the window smoke at the same time, you are completely in the middle of the open. Same goes for a flash swing on cat, flash swing on connector. Any play like that, you're in the complete middle of the open. So general concept is you want to have someone top mid near the boxes or towards chair that can actually at least make sure that if other players are taking ground on the map, at least if that's happening, that the player, you know, boxes or whatever is going to be able to peek out and trade. You know, he's not going to be full blind. He can kind of play anti-flash. 11-6. You have the kind of force here from Vitality. You have a 4v5 retake, and you actually have a really well-timed play from Xerxin. Well, I was actually going to say that, but that play is really well-timed if his teammates don't just kill everyone. Apparently, they just kill everyone. So Spinks going to delay for a second. Spinks eventually will activate. He's going to find one, then he finds a second. Jimmy catches Rob's trying to go for the trade, and then you just have Flamesy completely on his own. And I mean, I think this is one where you can try and chalk it up to, I mean, they have the right idea. They know where the T's are likely playing from. They have a good idea of what angles their teammates are vulnerable to and what angles are going to be swung right. You saw Jimmy. I think Jimmy was kind of protecting himself from Palace. He was kind of like playing a little bit safe from it. Then Spinks makes a contact on two players, and after Spinks makes contact on two players, then Jimmy pivots. He knows that Palace play is coming out. So obviously there's like some good teamwork going on there, but at the same time, that's just one where you're playing against mostly pistols, and a lot of the time it's just going to come down to landing your shots, right? If they just miss a couple of shots there, then the timing works out a lot better for Vitality, and you have a round that doesn't go their way. Somehow, from a 5v3 turned into a 3v3. Like, that's actually kind of crazy that was possible. Rob's just heard that, by the way. Rob's definitely heard that, which should tell you that they're... Actually, I'm not sure, because he can hear the guy drop, but maybe it's hard to tell if there's a guy that dropped or the guy jumped, right? Because maybe he just jumped for information. Because I was going to say it makes it obvious there was two players towards B. I'm interested... I think they might sound differently, but this is kind of a miscomm here, I think. Just straight up. Torji, he even has full utility. Not that it matters in that exact situation. You're not using utility from that spot, but he has full utility that would have made the round a lot more easily winnable, and maybe they could have closed it out 13-7, or 13-6 rather, but he's just not looking the right direction. I don't know if it's a miscommunication as much as it is mistimed. Like, I think he probably understands his teammate fell back off of short, but he probably just thinks that there's a few more seconds, since Rops actually walked through a smoke there after his teammate fell back. And the miscomm is probably just in the idea that someone from Mouz made noise falling off of the bricks, so Rops felt like he could walk through that smoke, whereas normally, if no sound is made, you're not just straight up walking through that smoke in a 3v3 all that often. It's kind of like it's a pretty risky play. But you have the triple A lurk. I mean, we saw Mouz do this, I believe, as well, right? Mouz, I mean, Vitality went for 2 Palace, 1 ramp. And what that allows is, one of the ideas that Mezzy could have actually also lurked through this smoke at some point, but because Apex fell back, right? Mezzi didn't really find a timing, but one of the things that does is it still allows you to sit in Palace, and sometimes the other player dying in Palace prompts that re-aggression. It's kind of one of those nice things to have a little bit of balance there in terms of like, okay, just because one player was spotted Palace and died doesn't mean that there's nobody else in Palace. We absolutely could have 2 players in Palace. God damn, Torji. Nice shot. All right, he tried to make a play. He even got red on the play, still finds himself a kill. That's kind of wild. And you have 8 rounds just like that for Vitality. And I think 12-8 is about the time when you start to get a little bit worried, isn't it? How about 12-9? Is 12-9 when you start to get worried? I feel like 12-9, you go for this buy here. You have a pretty decent buy, but you don't have any kits. You're missing a bit of utility. You're going for a play into Palace. Rops absolutely destroys Brawlin just instantly into the 4v5. Like, this is where I'm thinking, oh shit. Oh shit. Oh no. Oh no. This could go really wrong. And Spinks has been unbelievable in general in this game, but off of short as well. You know, he's found kills back into the round so often, even dry, walks back in, nearly takes down Apex, gets him down to 30 health, right? This is Spinks in like flow state. This is his like A+ game, right? This is like an actual really, really incredible game from Spinks where he clearly knows he's just finding timings all over the place. I actually really like this play, by the way. Rops backs up, nades into ramp as if he might have pivoted back around into ramp, and Xerxin moves back over to try and walk into Palace, and Rops is completely ready for that, gets the kill, turns into a 5v3. I mean, you can see how a Vitality 13-0 happened in this series, right? Then you have the aggression. I mean, this is what you need to be doing, right, if you're Mouz. This is the kind of standard. It's nothing surprising. This is kind of how rounds break down so often. This is part of why, like, opening frags are so important, because you get that initial opening frag as Rops, and it kind of topples the entire defense, right? They have to go for these aggressive plays. They have to be looking for something back, as long as that middle of the map, which did its job, which was it took control of mid. So if you have control of mid and you're in a 4v, or if you don't have control of mid and you're in a 4v5, you don't really have many options. You have to be going for an aggressive play like the ones that Xerxin, or like the one that Xerxin went for, like the one that Spinks went for as well, this one and the earlier one in middle, and you're walking to your opponents, and your opponents have a good idea of where you're coming from. There's only so many places you can be. So it's just going to be very hard for you to not get killed, right? It's going to be hard for you to win that second duel. But in any case, 12-10, this is kind of funny. Just the deaths there remind me of that Vitality Spirit game where Spirit got 13-6 or something, and they ended the game with more kills than Vitality. They actually had a better scoreline individually than Vitality, and it's really because of like exit fragging and like abandoning rounds, trying to keep your economy effective, especially on Anubis. That's extremely important, more so than Mirage. But obviously, you're this late into a game. If you can hold on to a couple of guns, it's not a bad idea. We have a reasonable buy from Mouz, but they're going to need to take some risks, and the triple push towards ramp from Mouz, I think, makes a lot of sense, especially you do it with 2 pistols and a rifle. So if the rifler dies, you can recycle it really easily, but not only that, you trade on that first pistol, and the second pistol player picks up the gun from the killed player, right, if you go 1 for 1. So it actually just, like, mathematically makes a lot of sense for that type of play. You have Rops, just the standard lurk situation. You don't want to be up here in theory because Brawlin should be able to see you at some point, and he does actually. But as you get up here, like into the ramp, the player on the ledge can see you as well. Whereas if you're a little further back, right, like if you're at the top of the ramp just outside, you can see their feet and they can't see you, which is a significant difference, right? Because I think if Brawlin saw Rops' feet and Rops didn't see him, he can kind of prompt to rotate. He can start getting players over towards him. He can get himself, you know, he can make, he might be able to make a play where you got to wait for him to drop off, and you go like left side ramp maybe, and you wait for him to drop, and then you peek out and catch him when he's still inaccurate or something, but it doesn't really matter. They probably weren't winning that round regardless, unless, I mean, it was winnable, I suppose, if Brawlin had gotten the kill on a Rops, but even if he sees his feet, the hit from Vitality was coming up connector a little too quickly for a rotate to actually get in. Torji takes a shot, suspicious, takes the shot right when Rops was on the other side of the wall. That's suspicious, isn't it? No, it's not. Thanks, Vaxox. Anyways, Rob's playing towards T spawn, like actually helping his teammate in mid rather than holding towards A. I like the idea behind it. Spinks and Brawlin go for the delayed swing into mid. I'll just show you this from like an alternative POV. Did they delay swing into mid? Okay, they were in mid. Then they actually back off just in time. Xerxon almost gets killed. Brawlin gets the kill. Spinks is swinging off into mid. They turn it into a 4v3 right away. Mezzy takes a little bit of damage, but this is the problem. You overload mid as Vitality, and it's interesting because it seems like they had the right idea. Like, they had a good idea that Mouz in this type of situation, this is kind of why it's easier to call from ahead, because you're setting up potential plays, and you're really seeing what your opponents are struggling with and what they're doing well. And one of the things that Mouz were struggling with, where they were struggling that they were kind of just slowly losing ground in middle throughout the rounds, and their little kind of semi-aggressions, their plays to try and get something done in the mid-round without actually getting too aggressive, they just weren't working. They were just losing the bomb sites in the mid-round. They were losing everything kind of piece by piece. Vitality did a really good job with that. So what were they expecting? Well, you had Robson T-spawn early. I think he was just waiting for his timing to throw that flash in mid, but they might have expected, like, look, they're going to do an aggressive play towards A, or they're going to do an aggressive play towards mid, most likely. They have 5 players prioritizing mid. I think they had 2 underpass and 3 in mid. They have 5 players like looking at mid, ready for mid, trying to deal with mid, and they still go I think they lose 3 eventually, right? They lose the initial 2, and I think a 3rd player ends up dying, gets naded from window or whatever. They end up losing 3 players. Like, even if you have the right idea strategically, sometimes it doesn't really matter if the frags just don't go your way, if players are in slightly the wrong position. All this video to say, we shouldn't have doubted him. Give Brawlin some props, all right? That's not to say that he's the best IGL of all time already, but I do think he's done a really good job evolving even over just a few events, and he's actually showing, in my opinion, some leadership qualities where he's taking the BO5 loss. He's like, look, I wasn't ready for BO5s. He's doing the post-game interviews. He's taking, he's not trying to hoard credit, but he's admitting when he has problems, when he has mistakes, when he doesn't do things quite correctly. I think that's what you want out of an IGL if you're hoping that they're going to do well long-term. And I think he's in the right part of his career for an IGL switch to make sense, which is the problem I have with the Twist IGL thing. He's in the wrong part of his career, in my opinion, to switch to IGL. He should just keep fragging.